Hello, literature lovers. Today, as you can see, I am discussing literary movements, and this one is very special. That is Scottish Chaucerians, and not much aware of this work. And I'm sure you will really talk about it and discuss it the way it is portrayed. Nectis or diction. This is also favored by Scottish Chaucerians. So I'm sure you will talk about it also. And university bits, most of us are aware of it, and you can have a look and get it. Now, talking about comedy of humor, that is also quite common, and examples and clarity is quite given clearly. Talking about the musk and the mask thing, and that is quite famous because of Milton and Shakespeare's Tempest, and I'm sure you will like it, and it is also very important, sir. Next comes Sons of Ben. So this is quite peculiar, not much famous, but it is asked commonly and you must be aware of it, and it's important in literary context. And next comes the metaphysical poets, that is quite common and I'm sure you will be aware of it. Read it for a better revision kind of a thing. Another thing is Cavalier Poets. I have already discussed it and I'm sure you will be aware of it and get an overview by reading it. Now, this comes as a context of Italian comedy. It is asked sometimes, and we should understand it in detail how the things are, and since we are not aware of it. Similarly, the Kit Kat Club, not many people are aware of it, and it is also asked, and some kind of reference is needed to understand it. Similar Describers Club, and this is also a group of literary intellectuals and scholars, and this is also important. The graveyard poetry and the lake poets, although they are a bit connected, but they all have their importance. Similarly, the satanic school and the cockney school, both are of the similar period but still have their own preferences. Now, talking about dark romanticism, it is quite important and we should study it in detail, just like the transcendentalism. And although it belongs to America, it was quite influenced by it. There is a club related to it, and so it's important to get an overview. Similarly, pre-Raphaelite is very popular. I'm sure you will be aware of it because of the Raphael, a very famous painter of France. And here comes the aestheticism. So this is quite common. Similarly, the fireside poets and also have their other names. And here comes the Oxford movement, that is also important, and the realism thing, talking the literary realism and parts of it. You can pause the video and check it in detail. I'm just trying to summarize it in early phases. And here comes naturalism, and here mainly Ibsen did his thing, and don't not to forget Maxim Gorky also did it. Impressionism is also important. Here Conrad and Virginia Woolf talk about it, and here next comes the symbolism. That is quite common in all the things, but the way these period talk about it in the French symbolism is important. Next coming the imagism. So that is also important and which also talks in surrealism context. Now, Rhymers Club talk about different other things. Similarly, the Irish Literary Revival also is of a kind, and you can get an overview by the name itself how this thing really got in. The Auden group and the generation is special because of that Max Pondy group. So it is quite simple to understand. The names are very important, and here comes the Harlem Renaissance. That group is important because of that Negro movement. And later on, talking about the war poets, and the list is given, which later on generated into the lost generation. And although I have discussed in detail in my earlier videos, I'm sure you will be aware of it. Bloomsbury group is also important because of that printing press thing, and Harold Bloom talks about it. And talking about the Bloom, then here comes the stream of consciousness, how it goes on, and later on we can talk about the Black Mountain poets, This is not so very common, but though very important though. And apocalypse or a new apocalypse is very important, and so many times it is asked in different exams related to it. Southern Algerians are also important, not much asked, but we can have an overview because of the. Next comes the Black Arts movement, and it's also called BAM in short, and you can have a look related to it. Existentialism is also important, and the philosophy of Europe. So now comes the very special one, agitprop, and this is quite important, and especially in the Russian context, and it is not much popular but though very important. So have a greater look on this thing. Theater of clarity is also important, and not much of awareness is there in that moment. And here comes theater of panic, that is a panic movement, and that have some weird writers, and you can see the work is quite different. Next comes epic theater, that is also very important, and people are not much aware about it because of that fourth wall concept is also related to it. So talking about it is very important. Now here comes angry young man, and these are the list of writers. The writers are very famous, and maybe we are not aware of the word. Next comes the kitchen swing drama. It is also quite relevant, very common, a bit difficult to understand, but quite related to angry young man. So we can get an. Now comes the Ashcan school, not much popular, but still important, similar to the theater of absurd and theater of oppressed. Both have their own category. Next comes the beat generation. So it's quite, now we are touching the postmodern era, and not to forget the confessional poetry, very common and used. And last but not the least, the movement. The word was coined by J.D. Scott, and who is the editor of The Spectator. And the authors are given. I'm sure you must be aware of it. Thank you.